Okay, so first I'm going to start off by washing my hands. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is peel my potatoes and wash them off. So first I'm going to put them in my strainer just to rinse them off. All rinsed, they're going to come over to the cutting board. I'm going to peel them each and dice them up. So just using my paring knife, I'm going to peel each potato. And I'm just going to cut it up so that it can cook in a pot. And I'm going to do this with the other two.
Go.
Okay, so now that my potatoes are all peeled and cut up, I'm discarding of my peelings, which normally would go in a compost. I'm going to put them back in my strainer so that I can rinse them off once again after they've been cleaned, just in case any of the dirt from the potato was still on it and got on the cutting board. So I'm done with my knife and cutting board, which are going to go in the sink and be washed later. And I'm going to rinse these. These are now cut. I'm going to go into my bigger pot, which I'm going to fill with water. It's filled with water. I've already turned on my stove top so that it's ready to cook. And I'm going to let that sit as they take the longest to cook. Now I'm going to wash my hands again after touching the potatoes. Next, I'm going to prepare my rice, which is just an Uncle Ben's best and fancy broccoli and cheddar rice. So all I need for that is some water, which it takes 1 3/4 cups. Let me get my measuring cups. So, and do 1 and then 3/4 after that. going to set that on my stove back here. Water's going to boil in that, and that stays uncovered as I pour my rice. And my sauce mix. And I'm just going to grab a fork and stir that in. Just making sure all the clumps are out of the sauce mix, and that's going to stay. I'm going to turn that up a bit. It takes a bit longer to cook. Once it gets to a boiling point, I let it stand in that boiling point for 20 minutes. So just up a little bit more. So I have my rice cooking, my potatoes are getting ready to boil. And now I'm going to do my fish. So I have my flour, my margarine, my fish, my plate, and my frying pan. So first I'm going to start off by putting my frying pan on and getting the butter. So just going to grab a plastic fork here. Melt some butter in my pan. This is just so the flour and the fish batter and everything don't stick. Just making sure it's greased up pretty good. The remainder of this is just going compost garbage, because you don't want to put it back in after you touch the pan, just in case it got contaminated with anything before, which it wasn't. It was a clean pan. So I'm going to get my flour. And I'm just going to scoop some out onto the thing instead of pouring it and making a mess like I would normally do, because I really don't want it all over my clothes. There, but I'm going to keep that in there just in case I need it. And I'm just going to use half of this. So this was frozen haddock fillets, which have been de-thawed. And I'm just going to use these sides. So I'm just going to flop it in my flour, which all this will be cleaned and sanitized afterwards, because flour makes a huge mess, as we know. Kind of rub it in so that it's all in the creases and ready to be on the pan. So, piece number one. And I'm going to use this piece. Same thing, just kind of covering it with the flour without making a huge mess. Putting that on to cook as well. So now I just have to dispose of this and wash my hands. So this would normally go in a compost. It's in my garbage. Plate will go in the sink. Washed. I'm gonna wash my hands and then wrap my fish back up. So, well, before I clean that off, I'm just going to check on my potatoes, which are now boiling. Which they still have a ways to go, so I'm going to let them boil. Saying that they're used for after. Going to grab another fork to check on and stir my rice since that hasn't started to boil yet. Just turn the temperature up a little bit because it's going to take a bit longer to cook. These will be reused in the same thing, so I'm just going to leave those there. That's starting to boil now, so I'm going to let it simmer. And then I'm going to grab my spatula to check on my fish. Just kind of move it around, just to make sure it's not sticking. So those still have a ways to go. Everything still has a ways to go. I'm going to set this over here. None of them are touching, just to make sure nothing gets contaminated. My potato fork, my rice fork, and my spatula for my fish. And I'll be back in a bit to show you more when it's finished cooking. Okay, so my fish is now cooked. I've got this turned off. I'm going to move it onto the burner that's not going. My potatoes are also done. I just checked those with my fork, so I'm going to turn this off. My rice still has a couple minutes to go, so I'm going to take my potatoes and I'm going to drain them. So potatoes are hot. I'm going to set them back on the burner for a minute. I'm just going to grab some margarine and mash up my potatoes with it. So just while I'm waiting for that to melt a little bit, I'm going to take my fork and check my rice, which seems to be cooked, so I'm going to turn the burner off for that one as well. And now I'm going to make my mashed potatoes. I'm going to just uncover that so that don't cook no more. And I'm going to start plating my dishes. So first I'm going to take my potatoes. Just clump some in the middle. Just grab a fork fancy up the dish a little. Next I'm going to get my rice. So I'm going to dispose of my forks that I already used. And I'm just going to bring out some servings of rice. The rice is going to sit right on top. The rest of this will either be wrapped up and eaten later, or it will go in the garbage. In my case, my dog will eat it when it cools down. So I'm just going to set that back on the burner that's been turned off the longest. And now I'm going to plate my fish. I don't need to wash my hands since I haven't been in contact with any of the food on my hands. But I will be in a minute because I just dropped that piece off. This is all done here. So, just finishing up the plating. I'm going to wash my hands now. To grab 2 forks, 1 for each plate, and 2 servings of potatoes, rice, and fish.